online at wcbe.org.
I'm John DeSando,
And I'm Mary Urena.
and this is It's Movie Time.
Grab the popcorn.
And this is Martin Luther King Day for us.
It is.
We're recording a few days before we're broadcast, but it's kind of neat that we're presenting also some black icons in One Night in Miami.
Yes, and that title reminded me of there's got to be a bar joke after that.
Yeah, I know.
One Night in Miami, ... But in fact, this is a very innovative, I think, look at four icons who in real life were friends, and in real life they were together on February 25th, 1964 to celebrate Cassius Clay's victory over Sonny Liston and attaining the World Heavyweight Boxing Championship for the first time.
Miami was alive with their presence.
It was, and I almost feel like Miami, because of the way it's portrayed in this film, is more than just the backdrop. It's almost a character with the lighting and the music,
Yes.
and it's very rich with the period
Yeah.
of the film.
And you know, Mary, I was thinking that considering all the volatile circumstances in the last few days, within the last week, it was quite peaceful. You know, the evening, and everybody wanted to celebrate Cassius Clay, but the people they saw inside, and even the people coming in to their hotel room, it was all so, it seemed to be so peaceful.
It seemed peaceful, but I do think there were some portrayals of lurking menace. And for those of you who aren't familiar with One Night in Miami, it was originally a play. It was written by Kemp Powers, and the playwright actually adapted this for the screen. And sometimes that can be risky because if you're not working in that medium, it's hard to translate to the screen from the stage. An example of that, I would say, is Proof. I was disappointed with the translation from the stage to the screen by the playwright because I just didn't think, I'm Paul Stanley something, I can't remember his name, I apologize, didn't capture more of the nuance you could capture through film. But in this case, I think Kemp Powers did a wonderful job of not only providing more of the character stories, which the characters are Cassius Clay, Jim Brown, Malcolm X, and Sam Cooke. He captures little scenes of their story before the play actually is allowed to start on stage, which is the four of them coming together at the Hampton House Hotel to celebrate the victory.
So you got some shots of Clay in the boxing match.
You do, in an early boxing match in England, and you have a portrayal of Jim Brown that he's visiting, you presume, a benefactor from his past.
Maybe the most devastating scene in the whole film.
I would agree.
Bo Bridges plays the Southern gentleman who is, I think, actually maybe the owner of his team, something like that. An NFL bigwig.
Yeah, it's never really made clear, other than you get the sense that he was a benefactor to Jim Brown early in his career.
And he comes out with a line toward the end when they're so solicitous to Brown, so appreciative of his fame and his ability, both his daughter maybe and Bridges' gentleman, that the last line is just devastating.
And it's a reminder of the Jim Crow South, and also the fact that even in his fame, he was still being put in his place, and that he potentially was being used by the white benefactor.
Yeah.
Even now in his career.
And when we have Malcolm talking to him in the room, of course he brings that up in the sense of his, I think whoever brings it up, when they're arguing amongst each other about their fame and the use of their fame, and Malcolm is the one who's really has this forum going. I mean, they want a party, some of them want a party, and Malcolm is way too serious to not to take this moment to preach to them about the importance of their fame, to use it for against racial injustice and so on, whatever.
Right, the fight that they're all fighting, and it's very relevant today, I think, because of what we've been through in terms of social justice, how we're continuing to evolve as a society. It was very interesting portrayal of these 4 black men who had risen to the height of their fame and stardom. Probably not as much Malcolm X at that point. He was certainly known.
Right.
He became more famous posthumously, which is unfortunate. But the fact that these men all had different paths in life and that they all had a platform upon which they could affect change. Malcolm is portrayed in the film as wanting them to use their platforms differently than what they are, and they are making the argument in their own character space that I am making a difference, and particularly with Sam Cooke, who's played wonderfully by Leslie Odom Jr., argues that, you know, I've established my own record label. I'm producing African American records. I'm providing jobs to African Americans, even though Malcolm was making the argument that you're producing pop songs.
Yes, he was.
So it's and the thing that I thought was interesting, even though this is play based, and it predominantly takes place in the hotel room at the Hampton House, is that the characters all are able to break away from this foursome in different groups of 2 and have different and more in-depth conversations.
Yes. I'm struck by Regina King's ability to create compositions that are dynamic, even though it's a less than dynamic setting. It's a very stagey setting, and some people will complain it's too stagey, but what do you want? It's based upon a play.
Well, and it's a very intimate portrait, imagined though it is, of these 4 men. 2 would be dead within a year.
Yes.
Both under very unfortunate circumstances, neither of which the murders have been solved or
Is that true of Cooke?
They did charge someone and try her, but it was a very inconsistent tale. It was the manager of a hotel he was staying at in LA. There was another woman involved whom he allegedly was assaulting, and they acquitted her as having committed the crime in self-defense. But when you read about it, there's some mystery to it, because it just doesn't seem, something's not right there.
Well, Leslie does a wonderful job of imitating and maybe giving you soul to his performance of Cooke, and he's the object of Malcolm's real concern. And you know, as you mentioned, making pop songs, you know, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you, songs like that, and Malcolm's going on, but as if Sam were supposed to create songs that were socially conscious. He doesn't have to do that. His bid is to be soothing and soulful.
And make money. Jim Brown is the one who points out in a separate conversation with Malcolm that it's just as much about economic power as a road to freedom.
Excellent point, yes.
As it is, you know, being treated equal under the law the way that we all should be. And I have to say, I'm in a book discussion group that's being sponsored by the Columbus Metropolitan Library to read the book Stamped, which was adapted by Jason Reynolds in a shorter format than the original books, Stamped. But I think the thing that was interesting in our book discussion a couple of weeks ago, it came up that a lot of slavery was derived and driven by economic power, and that part of the solution is that we all have equal access to and be able to pursue economic power. And Sam Cooke is definitely an example of somebody who took that by the reins. There is a scene, again, where Malcolm's trying to convince him that you're producing pop songs which aren't how you should be using your voice. And he plays for him Bob Dylan's
Oh, I love that, Mary. I knew you would say that. I'm trying to stay away from that, but you are absolutely right. It's so powerful.
It's very powerful, and it's actually, based on the research I did after seeing the film, it's actually true.
I believe it.
That Sam Cooke was inspired by Blowin' in the Wind to write a change is gonna come.
And he sings that in the film.
He does sing it in the film. The timeline is as one is apt to do, is played with a little bit. In fact, a few weeks before February 25th, 1964 was when he actually wrote it, and he actually performed it about a couple weeks after he wrote it on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. It's the only time Sam Cooke sang that song in public. It was released on an album a few months later, and unfortunately the video of that no longer exists.
Oh.
But you do get to see a wonderful rendition of it by Leslie Odom Jr. in the film.
Anyway, we haven't resolved a thing here, Mary.
We haven't. There's so much rich to talk about.
I think
with
we
this
ought
film.
to go to a podcast. That's what I think we ought to do.
All right.
And our podcast is called Back Talk, and we will be doing that after we do this show, which we're about to complete.
Yes.
So believe me, if you feel incomplete, so are we, because there is so much richness in this film that in the 5 minutes that we have for show, we couldn't possibly do it. But I think we've hit some of the highlights and give you an idea that it's an exciting, although stagey, film. But Mary Arena, the film is One Night in Miami. What grade do you award it?
I give it an A.
How could I not give it an A? All right, see you at Back Talk.
See you at Back Talk.